Chapter 1204. As adventurers, they often had to spend long nights in the wilderness. Therefore, even though the fine steel adventurers of Blue Rose were all women, they did not reject the idea of camping in the wild. Instead, they were very familiar with the idea of camping in the wild. Under Hagrid's orderly instructions, the entire group of fine steel adventurers of Tsangqiang Rose began their preparations. Tina and Tia set up the tents that they had prepared beforehand. As for Gigrain, he placed 4 totems that looked like magic arrays at 4 points around the campsite. After Gragland inserted the 4 thick totems in 4 different directions around the campsite, he connected the 4 totems with a thin rope. After that, he tied a bell in the middle of the rope between 2 totems. Most people who saw this would think that the bunch of fine steel adventurers were using the ropes and bells as a warning net. If a magical creature came here and touched the ropes, it would make the bells ring, allowing the adventurers to deal with the enemy in time. In fact, this bell warning net was indeed a defensive measure that adventurers often used when camping in the wilderness. However, the adventurers here weren't ordinary adventurers. They were the highest-ranked fine steel adventurers. Thus, this seemingly crude method of setting up a bell warning net was, in fact, heaven and earth apart from the bell warning net used by ordinary adventurers. First of all, the totems that were stuck at the 4 points of the campsite weren't ordinary wooden stakes. They were a type of magic tool. This type of magic tool was like a radar. It contained the power of information magic. Once it was stuck in the ground, it would begin to release magic, enveloping everything within a radius of 100 meters. The 4 bells tied to the ropes were also a type of magic tool. They had the effect of sounding alarms. Once the 4 totems detected a threat within the effective range of the magic, the 4 bells would ring due to the effect of the alarm. This kind of method was much more advanced than the ordinary bell warning net. After all, a normal bell warning net would only be effective when a magical creature came into contact with the ropes. For monsters and even humans who were more intelligent and would not casually fall into such traps, it was useless. In addition, by the time the monster touched the rope, it was equivalent to proving that the monster was not far away. There would be all kinds of problems in terms of time. If the attacking monster was a long-range type or had the ability to fly, then the so-called bell warning net would not be of any use. Now, the 4 totems and 4 bells had completely solved this problem. Although the price of the 4 totems and the 4 bells was rather high, as a fine steel-tier adventurer, this amount of money was a piece of cake. Apart from that, Ibiroi also used isolation, illusory, and remove spells in succession. Isolation could block the sound from the outside of the camp, so that no matter how big the commotion inside the camp, it would not spread to the outside, eliminating the possibility of attracting monsters that were more sensitive to sound. Illusory was a type of illusion that could camouflage the inside of the camp into the same scenery as the surrounding environment, eliminating the possibility of attracting monsters with night vision. Remove was used to isolate the aura of life, eliminating the possibility of attracting the undead who were extremely sensitive to the aura of life. Although the 3 types of magic spells were the lowest-ranked magic spells, they were still quite useful in this situation. At the very least, with these measures, everyone in the camp could have a good night's sleep in peace. Noah, who was in charge of preparing the bonfire, saw the whole process of Ibiroi's arrangement after lighting the bonfire. After knowing the wonderful use of these spells, Noah could not help but feel emotional. Although it is only a first-ranked spell, but a low-ranked spell does not mean that it is useless, right? Of course, isn't it? Ibiroi said as she continued with her arrangement. Magic is knowledge. If you want to learn magic, you must first grasp the knowledge. Only by increasing your knowledge can you understand how to use magic and how to use it. Even if you are facing enemies who can use magic, you can still make the right judgment and carry out a more accurate response. That is true. Noah said casually. However, there are so many types of magic in this world. It's not realistic to learn all the knowledge of all these types of magic. Therefore, according to the different ranks, the amount of magic knowledge you must have is also different. Ibiroi seemed to have opened up a new topic and even responded to Noah's casual words. For example, ordinary people do not have the opportunity to come into contact with high-ranked spells. Therefore, generally speaking, as long as you have the knowledge of the third-ranked spells, you will not be illiterate in this world. The third rank. The casual expression on Noah's face slowly dissipated. After pondering for a while, he suddenly said such a sentence. By the way, in this world, most people know what the highest rank of magic is, right? Taking advantage of this opportunity, Noah asked a question that had been bothering him for a long time. But, it's obvious that no one knows that level of magic, so how did you determine that the highest level of magic is that? Noah's words attracted the attention of everyone present. Ever since he had more or less obtained information about this world, Noah discovered that this world had many similarities with the game Yggdrasil. For example, professions and magic were the basics. Professions were already mentioned, so there was no need to talk about them here. But when it came to magic, it had to be mentioned. In this world, there were a total of 10 ranks of magic. Among these 10 ranks of magic, ordinary people could only use the second rank. Those who could use the third rank were called geniuses. The fifth rank was a high-level spell that only people who had stepped into the realm of heroes could use. The sixth grade of magic was the limit of magic that humans could use. It was said that a long time ago, there was someone among the 13 heroes who defeated the demon god who threatened the world who could use the seventh rank of magic. Unfortunately, that had always been a legend, and it had not been confirmed. As a result, magic above the seventh rank became a mythical realm that humans could not touch. In Yggdrasil, magic was divided into 11 ranks. Noah discovered that the top 10 ranks of magic in this world were exactly the same as the top 10 ranks of magic in Yggdrasil. The same here not only meant that the people in this world could use the magic in Yggdrasil, but also that the strength of the corresponding rank of magic was the same. Even if there were some newly developed magic in this world, the rank of the magic would be divided into the same rank in Yggdrasil. The only difference was that in Yggdrasil, in addition to the 10 ranks of magic corresponding to the 10 ranks of magic in this world, there was also the existence of the 11th rank of magic. This kind of magic that surpassed the 10th rank of magic was collectively known as super rank magic. However, super rank magic was not so much magic as it was a skill. It did not consume magic power when activated. There was a limit to the number of times it could be used in a day. At the stage when it was just learned, it could only be used once a day. After level 70, every 10 levels could increase the number of times it could be used. In other words, even if he wanted to teach it, he might not be able to teach it to others. Noah did not know if it was because of this that the highest rank of magic in this world was the 10th rank of magic. However, it was this saying that the highest rank of magic was the 10th rank that Noah really did not understand. If no one can even use the 7th rank of magic, then how did they determine that the highest rank of magic is the 10th rank? Noah asked. After all, in this world, no one can use such a high rank of magic, right? Such a question made everyone stop what they were doing and look at each other. Chapter 12:05. The entire camp fell into an indescribable silence. However, Noah could feel that it wasn't because he mentioned something that shouldn't be mentioned that led to this situation. It was because the rest of them had the same confusion. At the very least, Glenn, Tina, and Tia all had confusion written all over their faces. It was quite clear that Glenn, Tina, and Tia also didn't know the answer to this question. Annabelle, who had been standing behind Noah, also raised her head slightly. Obviously, Annabelle was also slightly interested in this topic. It could be said that Annabelle didn't know anything about the situation of this world. Because the information obtained from the people of the Sunshine Scripture was only shared with Noah and the Guardians, and it had not been conveyed to the rest of the people in the big underground tomb of Nasarek. Therefore, Annabelle, who was not clear about the situation of this world, had just been following Noah's instructions during this period of time. Perhaps, Annabelle didn't seem to care much about the situation of this world and felt that it didn't matter. For Annabelle, no matter what happened in this world, it had nothing to do with her. As long as Noah was fine, it had nothing to do with Annabelle. That was Annabelle's idea. Now, the reason why she was interested in this topic was only because Annabelle knew that in the big underground tomb of Nasarek, level 10 magic was not that rare. Not to mention others, Yael Abed, Zaisha, Yon, Mer, Cossets, Demiurgos, and other guardians could all use level 10 magic. For max level 100 characters, the use of tier 10 spells was quite frequent in battles. Therefore, Annabelle, who could only use level 8 magic, was more or less interested in that level of magic. Under such circumstances, Ibirua quietly completed the rest of her arrangements. Then, she came to the bonfire and sat down across from Noah. Raising her head, Ibirua cast her gaze on Noah through the gap of the mask. Do you know the 8 Desires King? 8 Desires King. Noah was startled at first, then his heart moved. 8 Desires King. Noah had indeed heard of this term before. Of course, the method was still hearsay. This was because the so-called 8 Desires King only appeared in myths and legends in this world. Moreover, it was a myth that anyone with a little bit of knowledge would know. The so-called 8 Desires King was actually an unknown existence. It was said that about 500 years ago, there were a few existences with great divine power that suddenly appeared in this world. They had once dominated this world with absolute power for a short period of time. Some people said that the 8 Desires King was as tall as 9 heavens. Some people said that the 8 Desires Kings were the most powerful race in this world. They were the kings of the dragon race and were called Dragon Kings. There were many different opinions, and no one could confirm what kind of existence the 8 Desires King was. However, in that era, the 8 Desires King, who had great divine power, destroyed all the countries in this world. He relied on his unparalleled power to dominate the entire world. However, the 8 Desires King was still not satisfied. After dominating the world, he became even more ambitious and pointed his spear at each other. In the end, the 8 Desires Kings who fought for each other's things all died together. This myth was actually very unpopular. This was because no one was willing to admit that this world was once dominated by some inexplicable existences whose origins were unknown. In the end, they even had to rely on their mutual destruction to regain this world. However, whether it was really just a myth or a legend was still a question. Of course, many people thought that this was an exaggerated story. However, among some people with status and power, many people thought that the 8 Desires King actually existed in reality. The reason was very simple. Rumor had it that there was a city in the distant southern desert. That was the capital built by the 8 Desires King when he dominated the continent. That capital still existed to this day. Moreover, from time to time, there would be rumors that some people obtained some treasures that the 8 Desires King once owned from there and brought them out to dominate for a time. It was said that in the past, the 8 Desires King not only had the power to destroy the world, but also countless treasures. Under such circumstances, Ibirua began to explain. Among these treasures, there was a magic book called the Nameless Spellbook. A magic book? Noah asked curiously. Could it be that the so-called 10th level magic was learned from that magic book? That's right. Ibirua nodded. In the book left behind by the legendary 8 Desires King, it contains unimaginable magical items. It said that it records all the magical items in the world. Even the newly invented magical items in this world will be recorded in the book. Even the newly invented magic would be automatically recorded. Noah raised an eyebrow. Is that the function of that magic book? Who knows? Ibirua curled her lips. In any case, it's because of the records in the nameless spellbook that people know that level 10 magic exists. There's such a thing. At some point in time, Gegland came over and sat beside Ibirua. He looked at her and directly said this sentence. Why didn't I know about it? There are many things you don't know. Ibirua glanced at Gragland. After all, although the highest level magic is the 10th level, and this is widely spread because of the existence of the nameless spellbook, people only know that the highest level magic is the 10th level. In other words, people only know that the 10th level magic exists, but they don't know that it was obtained from the nameless spellbook, right? Noah smiled indifferently. Then, does that book really exist? Who knows? Ibirua said the same thing as before. It's just that it said that people have seen the book with their own eyes, and those who have seen it all said that the book is protected by an extremely powerful magic. Apart from the rightful owner, no one else is allowed to touch it. That's only natural, isn't it? Haihigi walked over and sat beside Noah as she spoke. It's a divine item that records all the magic in the world, and even the 10th level magic, the highest level magic in the world. Its value is incomparable to anything in this world, so how can it be casually flipped through? That's why people have to know their own limits. Ibirua concluded with this sentence. It's best if you don't end up like the 8 Desires King because of that item. Otherwise, even if you have the greatest power, you'll only end up as a laughingstock. Ibirua, Gragland, Tina, and Tia all nodded. Only Noah said thoughtfully. If it's a magic item that can automatically record newly developed magic, then is it possible that this magic item can only record up to the 10th level magic, and can't record magic above the 10th level? That's not impossible. Ibirua chuckled. However, even spells of the 7th order and above are considered to be in the realm of legends. The limit of a human is the 6th order of magic. Only the legendary 13 heroes can learn spells of the 7th order, not to mention the highest 10th order. If that's the case, who would think that there would be spells of a higher rank than the 10th rank? Hagrid smiled faintly. Even if there is, no one at the 10th level can use it. Even if magic of a higher level exists, it's just a figurehead to people. Noah responded with a smile, but he was more or less thinking about it. Perhaps there were records of magic beyond the 10th level. But those who saw it didn't mention it, so that wasn't necessarily the case. Chapter 1206. By the time he noticed it, the village with a strange atmosphere was already in front of Noah's eyes. It was a village that occupied a fairly large area. However, Noah was still somewhat hesitant about whether or not he should call it a village. The reason for this was that the village was surrounded by high walls, making it impossible to see what was going on inside. The only thing that could be seen was the watchtowers that were taller than the walls of the village. The structure was rather sturdy. It was rare to see such a sturdy watchtower even in the cities of some kingdoms. Rather than calling it a village, it would be more appropriate to call it a strategic stronghold. It gave off a heavily guarded feeling. Of course, the village was relatively close to the mountains where all kinds of monsters lived. The villagers were worried about being attacked by monsters, so it was not strange for them to build tall walls and watchtowers. The problem was that for a relatively poor village, the extravagant protection of a protective wall should only be built around the buildings or warehouses, and the farmland should be placed outside the wall. After all, if the farmland was surrounded by the village, building a wall that surrounded the farmland and residences would be rather taxing and costly. It was not something that a normal village could afford. However, there was not a single acre of farmland outside the walls of the village. Judging from the size of the wall, the farmland was really surrounded by the village. In addition, the people on the watchtowers in the village could see arrows nocked on their bowstrings slowly moving in all directions as if they were patrolling. It was as if they were in an overly cautious state, ready to shoot at any moment. Such a scene was telling others. This village was definitely not as simple as it looked. Noah stepped out of the forest in the mountain range and gazed at the heavily guarded village. After a while, he turned his head and looked at Haggis. "That's the target." "That's right." Hagrid narrowed her eyes. "Have you encircled the entire field?" "Of course they did, right?" Gerland said in disdain. "The farmland is used to cultivate drugs. How can they be placed outside for people to admire? That's why we need to sneak in and burn the village," Ebirua said. "But before that, we need to prepare some things." Haihigi nodded before turning to Tina and T. "Tina, T, I'll leave it to you." "Understood." Tina and T responded at the same time. Then, their bodies flashed and turned into blurry shadows, rushing towards the village. In just a while, even Noah could not see Tina and T. Noah and the others set off before dawn. So, even though they arrived at their destination, there was still about an hour or so before dawn. The reason why they set off before dawn and arrived at their destination was mainly to make it easier for Tina and T to sneak into the village. After all, it was impossible for the stronghold that was used to cultivate the raw materials of drugs to not have a special liaison. Those liaisons, no matter how bad they were, should at least be able to use the message magic. In order to prevent these liaisons from using a message to transmit information when the village was attacked, causing the people in the village to be prepared and even retreat or call for help, Noah and the others first needed to get rid of the liaisons. This kind of work was undoubtedly Tina and T's specialty. Once Tina and T got rid of the liaisons, they would set the village on fire. At that time, Noah and the others could directly rely on their invincible strength to directly rush into the village and wreak havoc. "Do you need me to go with you?" Noah asked casually. "I also have a way to sneak in without being discovered." Although he was discovered by Gray and Vaz in the world of Elven Sword Dance, that did not mean that Noah's invisibility helmet could be seen through by anyone. The reason why Gray and Vaz could discover Noah was because they had been assassinated for most of their lives and developed terrifying intuition. Noah didn't think that there would be such an existence similar to Gravath in a stronghold used by one of the departments of a criminal organization to cultivate drug raw materials. Therefore, as long as Noah used Hades' invisibility helmet to sneak into the village, it would definitely be more efficient than Tina and T. Unfortunately, Marcy shook her head. "Just leave it to Tina and T. They are assassins and ninjas. No one is more suitable for this kind of work than them." As it turned out, Haggis' trust was absolutely right. Almost not long after, in front of them, in the village that was built with high walls, a burst of fire suddenly appeared, causing the people on the lookout tower to panic. Seeing this, Haggis' eyes lit up and smiled. "The operation has begun. Everyone, it's our turn." "Okay." Geegland was the first to shout. "I've long wanted to smash this dirty place into smithereens." After saying that, Geegland directly rushed out. Noah, Haggis, and Ibirui looked at each other and then smiled at the same time. Then, Haggis' eyes flashed with a hint of coldness. "Let's go." The light that represented the activation of magic flickered on the group of people. In the next moment, Noah, Annabelle, Haggis, and Ibirui directly used the flight magic to fly into the village that was surrounded by flames. Immediately after, the four of them split up and flew in different directions. "Fire! Put out the fire! Why is it suddenly on fire? Water! Where's the water? Bring the water over." When Noah flew over the burning field alone, the whole village was already in a mess. Every one of them had a weapon in their hands. Their appearance was rough, and they were definitely not the good kind. At a glance, it was obvious that they were used to tyrannical abuse. They were simply outlaws of the underworld, shouting and yelling at the surroundings with a ferocious look on their faces. "Fire!" Noah could not help but sneer. "Then let me add fuel to the fire." After saying that, Noah spread out his hand, and around his body, a beautiful magic circle suddenly appeared, covering the entire space. On the beautiful magic circle, bursts of magic light began to gather, causing the dazzling light to explode in midair, finally attracting the attention of the people below. All of a sudden, the eyes of all the outlaws with weapons in their hands widened, and they roared out in shock. No! It's not a fire. It's an enemy attack. You finally understand. A trace of coldness appeared in Noah's eyes. Unfortunately, it's too late. In the next moment, the beautiful magic circles that covered Noah's body burst out with flashes of light. Beams of magic light burst out from the beautiful magic circles, like a meteor shower falling from the sky, shrouding the area below. Boom! 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 Accompanied by a series of explosions, a fierce fire burst out in a corner of the village, like a mushroom cloud, rising into the air. Boom! 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 At the same time, in the village, frequent explosions began to occur in other corners, setting off the same intense fire. Sometimes, it was a sky full of lightning that fell to the ground. Sometimes, it was a scorching fireball that exploded on the ground. Sometimes, it was a bright crystal that exploded from the ground. Attacks like these landed on the ground one after another, destroying buildings one after another, stirring up intense flames and shockwaves. Noah, Annabelle, Ohadjisai, and Ibilua began to move from the four corners of the village, wildly unleashing magic from mid-air, causing beams of light, lightning, fireballs, and crystals to explode in the village one after another, turning the village into a sea of fire at an astonishing speed. Run! There's a magic chanter attacking the village. Where's the liaison? Ask for help quickly. In the village, the outlaws belonging to the Yakuza's drug department were like ants on a hot pan, jumping and jumping anxiously, crying for their parents as they ran back and forth. Only a few people, under the roar of some fierce burly men who seemed to have a high status, began to set up bows and arrows, shooting at Noah, Annabelle, Ohadjisai, and Ibilua in midair. Under such circumstances, the village was gradually covered in a sea of fire. Chapter 1207. The Kingdom of Liestige, Royal City. In one of the corners of the vast royal city, there was a building. From the outside, there was almost nothing out of the ordinary about this building. However, in this building, at this time, the biggest dark side of the kingdom was gathered. In a room that looked like a meeting room, there were 8 people sitting around a round table. Some were young girls in their prime. Some were men in their prime. Some were old men who had been through a lot. Some were middle-aged men who were neither too old nor too young. In this group of people, the 8 people were all doing their own things. Some were looking at the documents in their hands. Some were talking to the subordinates who were on standby behind them. Some of them were pressing a finger to their temples. It was obvious that they were using the message magic to communicate with someone in a faraway place. Some of them, however, were fiddling with precious-looking magic tools, having a lot of fun playing with them. Undoubtedly, they were sitting at the same table, but these people did not even look at the others, all of them were doing their own things. Such a strange atmosphere and scene, in the eyes of the subordinates who were on standby, it was as if they were used to it, as if it was a matter of course. In fact, if it was a matter of course, it was indeed a matter of course. Because, although these people belonged to the same organization in name and had a cooperative relationship with each other, in reality, they were often at odds with each other because of benefits, only occasionally would they form a cooperative relationship. After all, these people originally belonged to different organizations. Even if they were now united, they still had not established a true trust. The reason why they would attend the collective meeting in the royal city on a fixed date was because, if they did not attend, it would bring a lot of trouble. In fact, those who did not attend this meeting would be considered a possible traitor, and thus become the target of a purge. Therefore, even under such a dangerous situation, these people still hurried to the imperial city just to attend the meeting. Among them, there was such a woman. The color of her skin was a sickly white, the clothes she wore were also white, there was a snake tattoo from her hand to her shoulder, and there was also purple eyeshadow and purple lipstick. One look and you could tell that she was not an innocent girl. The woman's name was Hilma. Like the others, Hilma didn't have any intention of conversing or interacting with the other 7 people sitting at the same table. Instead, she was reading a document in her hand while biting on a pipe and exhaling smoke. At a certain moment, Hilma suddenly frowned and pressed a finger to her temple. That was a sign that he had received a message. Then, Hilma's expression changed, becoming extremely gloomy. The 7 people who didn't seem to be conversing with the rest of the people sitting at the same table all cast their eyes on Hilma, proving that they were indeed paying attention to their surroundings. One of the men even spat out a deep voice at Hilma. What? Did something happen? The one who asked was a bald man with half of his face tattooed with a beast. The bald man had an extremely strong physique, and the muscles on his body bulged explosively. His expression was extremely fierce, and his eyes were full of coldness. One look and you could tell that he wasn't a good person. Moreover, the other 7 people, including Hilma, all had bodyguards with them. Only this man had no one behind him. That was because this man didn't need any guards at all. In terms of strength, as long as this man was willing, he could completely play around and kill everyone in this room. This man's name was Jiao Luo. For those who didn't know this name, Jiao Luo was just a guy with a fierce appearance. But for those who knew this name, Jiao Luo was definitely a target that many people didn't want to provoke. As for why, the reason was very simple. Even if the kingdom's strongest warrior, Gu Jifu, personally went up against Jiao Luo, it wouldn't be easy for him to win. The manager of the Yakushi's security department. He was the leader of the 6 people who could match the existence of a fine steel-ranked adventurer. For such a man to question Hilma, even Hilma, who was also a manager of one of the 8 departments of the Yakushi, couldn't completely ignore him. Hilma took a deep breath and spoke in a deep voice. A village under my command that produces raw materials for drugs has been attacked. This one sentence made the atmosphere of the entire scene drop to the freezing point. Ha! Jiao Luo let out a cold laugh that made people think of the low growl of a wild beast. Looks like there's only one person who has the guts to attack the Yakushi, right? Jiao Luo's words made the rest of the people present more or less furious. In the Ristage Kingdom, who knew how many nobles were in cahoots with the Yakushi? With those nobles around, it was believed that if the kingdom wanted to attack the Yakushi, they wouldn't be able to hide this matter from the Yakushi, regardless of whether they would be stopped by the nobles who were in cahoots with the Yakushi. Since one of the strongholds under Hilma's command had been attacked and he himself didn't receive any news, it was enough to prove that it wasn't the kingdom that did it, but rather a personal decision. Due to a personal decision, under the obstruction of the nobles, he couldn't mobilize a large force and could only attack with a small number of people. In the end, he was still able to successfully destroy one of the strongholds under the Yakushi's department. There weren't many people who had such ability. It's that group of women from the Wild Rose, right? Hilma closed his eyes and bit on the pipe again. Chapter 1208. Just as Haihige had said, after destroying the Yakuza drug department's base to cultivate raw materials, Tina and T found a piece of parchment in the village. If they guessed correctly, there must be information on the other 7 departments of the Yakuza. However, the information on the parchment was written in code and had to be deciphered. Therefore, once they returned to the capital, Haihige immediately took the parchment and went straight to the capital to find Lana so that Lana could decipher the code. With the Golden Princess's wisdom, deciphering the code should not be difficult. Therefore, when Agagi and her party went to the capital to decipher the information, Noah rejected Agagi's invitation to go with them, and directly found an inn to check in with Annabelle. Together with Annabel, they took stock of the gains in the destroyed village. As a base to cultivate raw materials for drugs, the village naturally had more than just drugs. A certain amount of expenses and funds were required. Now, all of that went into Noah's pocket and was obtained by Noah. Of course, Noah's gains were not much. At least, compared to the profits that Noah would earn from selling large amounts of stainless steel, this was not much. However, that was only because they had only destroyed one base. Once all of the bases of the 8 departments of the Yakuza were destroyed, the gains would be the real deal. Therefore, when Haihige and the others went to the capital to discuss deciphering the information with Lana, Noah stayed in the inn and waited for the moment to act. On this day, Noah also stayed in the inn and sat in front of a table, flipping through a thick book. It was a book that looked like crystal, but also like spring water. The cover was constantly reverberating with circles of ripples. It was an incredible book. Not many people knew about this book. However, if a legend was mentioned, many people would clearly know the reason behind it. According to legend, in the world of Norse mythology, there was a world tree. The world tree had 3 main roots. Among these 3 main roots, one of them extended to the country where the giants lived. And under this root that extended to the giant country, there was a mysterious spring water that contained all wisdom. It was said that as long as one drank a mouthful of the spring water, one would be able to obtain supreme wisdom. In order to bring wisdom into the world of the gods, Odin, the main god of Norse mythology, found this spring and obtained the wisdom named Rune at the cost of losing an eye forever. From then on, the main god Odin became the god of wisdom and magic. This was a famous story that anyone who had some knowledge of Norse mythology would know. The book in Noah's hand was the prototype of this mythical relic. Noah only remembered the nameless spellbook of the 8 Desires King after Ibirui mentioned it. It was not until this time that Annabel, who had been quietly waiting by the side, came to Noah with a cup of black tea, and spoke respectfully. "Sir Noah, please have some tea." "Thank you, Annabel." Noah smiled slightly, took the black tea handed over by Annabel very naturally, and took a sip. At this moment, there was a knock on the door of the room. Noah stopped drinking tea and looked in the direction of the door. Annabel immediately stepped forward and opened the door. The next moment, a group of people appeared in front of Noah and Annabel together. The leader was a fat man. The man was wearing what seemed to be a uniform, and there was a badge that reflected a bronze brilliance hanging on his chest. His ruddy face was full of fat, and there was an oily luster on it. Behind this fat man, there were 4 people standing. There were 4 armored men with spears in their hands. Seeing the 4 people holding spears and wearing armor, Noah frowned. Because in the kingdom, only the kingdom's soldiers would appear in such attire. Why would a fat man with the kingdom's soldiers look for Noah? Before Noah could think of anything, Annabel's cold gaze swept across the group of people and said so. "Who are you?" As always, except for Noah, Annabel was so indifferent to any human. However, the fat man with the 4 soldiers couldn't care less about that. This was because when he saw Annabel's astonishing beauty, the fat man's face was stunned. Then, his entire expression became slightly obscene. That look was simply as if he wanted to lick Annabel all over. His behavior naturally made Annabel's eyes show some murderous intent. However, before that, the chubby man pretended to be serious and coughed once. He used a sharp voice that caused people to frown and said this sentence with a slightly off-pitch voice. "I'm the royal city's patrol officer, Stavin." The words of the fat man named Stavin made Noah's brows furrow deeper. The so-called royal city's patrol officer referred to a public official who protected the security of the royal city, which was also the boss of the guards in charge of patrolling the city. The scope of authority was quite extensive. Why would such an patrol officer in charge of the security of the royal city suddenly come to the door? Ignoring Noah's question, the man who called himself Stavin said to Annabel with his chest puffed out. This should be Noah Doria's residence, right? Hearing that, Noah narrowed his eyes. He didn't come with good intentions. Chapter 1209. What Annabelle didn't know was that the visit of this patrol officer named Stoffen had already been labeled as a hostile visitor by her master. However, Annabelle had the same idea. Seeing that Stoffen was pretending to be serious, but his pair of eyes frequently swept back and forth on her body with a somewhat obscene look, Annabelle didn't think that such a person would come to invite Noah to have a meal together. At that moment, Annabelle planned to drive all these people away without hesitation. However, before that, Noah's voice slowly echoed in the room. "Annabelle, let him in." "Yes." Annabelle responded without any hesitation, and dodged to the side, giving way to the door, and spoke coldly without even looking at Stoffen. "My master wants you to go in." Hearing this, Stoffen was stunned, and then the obscene look in his eyes turned into outright jealousy. If it were any other time, if someone dared to speak to Stoffen in such a rude tone, Stoffen would have already lost his temper. Now, the reason why Stoffen didn't lose his temper was not that he had become magnanimous, but that he was blinded by jealousy. As for the reason for jealousy, it couldn't be simpler. A mere businessman can actually have such an outrageously beautiful subordinate. It's really unfair. Annabelle's statement of "my master" clearly explained her relationship with Noah. Looking at Annabelle's frosty expression, but she still didn't lose her beauty, and instead added a bit of the temperament of an ice beauty, Stoffen's heart really became itchy. If there's a chance, with this thought, the fat on Stoffen's face piled up into an expression that couldn't be more fake, then he walked into the room with his head held high. The group of soldiers behind Stoffen just wanted to follow in, but Annabelle blocked the door in a flash. Glancing at the soldiers who were stunned, Annabelle spoke with a blank expression. "Sir, Noah didn't let you follow in." The soldiers were speechless. However, that's true. As an ordinary soldier, if they didn't obtain permission, they would be sentenced for breaking into someone's residence. Sir Tupon frowned and waved his hand impatiently. "You guys can wait outside." All the soldiers nodded in agreement. Then, Stoffen looked into the room. He saw that Noah was still sitting in front of the table, holding a cup of black tea in his hand and sipping it. Seeing that Noah was ignoring him, the corner of Steve's mouth twitched. He was about to get angry, but he thought of something and suppressed his anger. Little did he know that Noah had seen this scene clearly. Thus, Noah curled his lips and smiled. He placed the teacup in his hand on the table and made an inviting gesture to the seat opposite him. "Mr. Stoffen, aren't you going to sit down first?" "There's no need for that," Stoffen said to Noah in a businesslike manner with a straight face. "I'm here on official business." "You're Noah Doria, right?" "That's right." Noah nodded and smiled. "I wonder why you're here on official business, Mr. Patrol Officer. My place can't be compared to those luxurious offices. Are you playing word games with me?" "Mr. Noah." Sir Tupon couldn't help but reveal a hint of anger. "Don't play dumb. You should know very well why I'm here." "I can't pretend that I didn't hear that." Noah shrugged. "Mr. Patrol Officer, you're wrong. I don't know why you're here. It's just that," speaking of this, Noah looked at Sir Tupon with a meaningful gaze. "It shouldn't be anything good, right?" Sir Tupon's face was flushed red. He was infuriated. As the patrol officer of the royal city, he was in charge of the security of the royal city. In the past, whenever Sir Tupon looked for someone in the name of carrying out official business, even if that person was a famous tycoon, who wouldn't be polite to Sir Tupon because they were worried that Sir Tupon would take advantage of them. But now, a mere merchant not only didn't treat Sir Tupon with respect, but also displayed an extremely carefree attitude. For someone like Sir Tupon who thought that he was in a high position, it was absolutely unbearable. "Mr. Noah, you can laugh as much as you want now. You won't be able to laugh later." Shirtupan's tone became firm as he shouted at Noah. As far as we know, Mr. Noah seems to have been selling a large amount of steel in the royal city recently. Is that true? That's true. Noah nodded nonchalantly. What's wrong? Could it be that doing business in the royal city is considered disrupting public order? If it's just doing business, then of course not. Sure, Yafin said with a disgusting tone. It's just that that's only if the goods are legal. Hearing this, Noah roughly understood what Shirtupan was trying to say. Mr. Noah, other than you, no one has been able to sell such a large amount of steel. After all, steel is very precious. Shirtupan shook his head as he spoke. In the royal city, we have never heard of a place where steel can be mined in such a large amount. So, we have the right to suspect that the steel you are selling in the royal city was obtained through illegal means. Shirtupan revealed a victorious smile after he finished speaking. For example, the illegal extraction of stainless steel in the nobles' territories without permission. I see. Noah nodded without any change in his expression. So, what are you going to do, Mr. Patrol Officer? Investigate, of course. Shirtupan said matter-of-factly. Please come with us and accept our investigation. Shirtupan, who was speaking, did not notice. Behind him, Annabelle slowly placed her hand on the hilt of the sword at her waist. If Noah did not stop her, it would only take a second for Shirtupan's head to come in contact with the ground along with a large amount of blood. In this regard, Noah only looked at Shirtupan's victorious face as if he wanted to see through Shirtupan's thoughts. After a while, he suddenly smiled. I understand. Noah stood up and spoke indifferently. Then I will go with you, Mr. Patrol Officer. Hearing this, Shirtupan revealed a victorious smile. Annabelle silently put her sword back into the sheath at her waist. However, the way she looked at Shirtupan was as if she was looking at a dead person. There was no emotion in her eyes. After that, under Shirtupan's lead, Noah and Annabelle walked out of the hotel together. There was a soldier standing around them, as if to protect them and also as if to escort them as they walked into the depths of the imperial city. However, halfway through the main street, Shirtupan suddenly turned into a dark alley and continued to walk forward as if nothing had happened. Sir Noah, Annabelle said softly. However, before she could continue, Noah raised his hand and interrupted her. Don't worry. Noah said concisely. I have my own plans. Annabelle muttered to herself for a while, then nodded and did not say anything else. Just like that, under Shirtupan's lead, the group walked quite a distance. It was not until 30 minutes later that the destination came into view. Instead of calling it a destination, it was more like a towering wall that appeared in Noah's eyes. The wall completely isolated the inner and outer space, forming a heavy atmosphere. That atmosphere made people think of a prison, not an important administrative area. Shirtupan didn't seem to care about Noah's thoughts at all. He continued to walk forward, and it didn't take long for him to find a lattice-shaped door in the corner of the wall. We're here. Shirtupan turned his head at this time and looked at Noah patiently. Please come in with us, Mr. Noah. Looking at Shirtupan, it seemed that if Noah didn't go in, he would immediately send someone to take Noah in. However, Noah's performance was different from what Shirtupan imagined. Noah ignored Stavin, or rather, it was as if Stavin was no longer of any use. Noah ignored him and walked through the door. A courtyard appeared in front of Noah. Chapter 12:10. The courtyard that appeared in front of Noah's eyes was not like the dark alleys he was in. It gave off a gloomy atmosphere. The trees were trimmed neatly and tidily. The ground was also swept clean. In such a courtyard, there was a small path that extended from the door Noah was in. It was directly connected to an open space that looked like a training ground. The ground was covered with hard stone bricks. On that open space, a group of about 30 people were either sitting or standing. They were looking in the direction of the door, and their gazes on Noah were full of evil intentions. Bang! Almost at the same time, a loud sound of a door closing reverberated behind Noah. He did not need to turn his head to know that the door at the entrance had been closed. Looking around, one by one, people who had been hiding in unknown places slowly walked out from all directions. They all had the same malicious smile on their faces as the people in the open space. In other words, at this moment, the entire courtyard was surrounded by people who looked extremely violent. In the center of the encirclement were Noah and Annabelle. As for Starvan, he walked forward with his head held high under the protection of the violent people around him. He walked past Noah with his head held high. He did not even look at Noah, as if he would feel that he was not ostentatious enough. It really reminded one of the idiom, "The fox uses the tiger's might to intimidate others." In such a manner, Stoffan finally walked to the side of a man. He was bald, with explosive muscles all over his body and a beast tattoo on his face. He was exuding a ferocious aura from head to toe. "Mr. Jialuo." Stoffan showed a fawning smile to the bald man. "I've brought him to you. You've done well." The man named Jialuo smiled satisfactorily. "Don't worry, I'll put in a good word for you in front of those aristocrats. I'll let you know that cooperating with the Yakuza is definitely beneficial and harmless." "Thank you, Mr. Jialuo." Stoffan was instantly overjoyed and nodded repeatedly. Instead, it was Noah who raised his eyebrows and looked at Jialuo with a different gaze. "You're from the Yakuza?" "To be more precise, you should say that we're from the Yakuza's security department." Jialuo grinned. "And I'm the manager of the Yakuza's security department, Jialuo." "Security department?" Noah was a little surprised and looked at the people around him. "So you're saying that there's a 6-armed centipede that's rumored to be comparable to a fine steel adventurer here? You know quite a lot." Jialuo was also a little surprised, and spread his hands. "Since they've already named you, then come out and meet our big client." As soon as he finished speaking, 5 people walked out from the crowd behind Jialuo and stood behind him. Standing on the far left was a man wearing a black robe with a hood. The lower hem of the robe was embroidered with a flame-like pattern with bright red threads. The face under the hood could not be seen, and there was not a trace of life on his body. He was a very strange person. "I'm Daiwanok." Beside the black-robed Yakuza was a woman wearing a thin silk robe, with gold rings on her wrists and ankles, and 6 scimitars hanging from her belt. "I'm Adeline." Standing next to the woman who called herself Astrian was a handsome man in a brocade robe with a vest and coat embroidered with gold thread, and a thin sword in his hand. "I'm Momvest." Standing beside the self-proclaimed Mamvest was a warrior with a sword firmly sheathed in his scabbard, protected by a full-body armor without any decorations. "I'm Peshlian." As for the man who called himself Peshlian, on the rightmost side, there was a man with pale skin, sharp eyes, and thin cheeks. He looked like a bird of prey. "I'm Dune Lunt." The 5 people who reported their names stood behind Jialuo, making him look like an artist who was showing off his work that he was proud of. He spread his arms and laughed loudly. "Together with me and Jialuo, we are the strongest people in the Yakuza's security department's 6 arms." Following Jialuo's laughter, the other 5 people also raised their heads and puffed out their chests, obviously feeling proud. However, 6 Arms Group did not notice. In front, Noah's gaze swept across 6 Arms Group one by one. After a while, the corners of his mouth lifted slightly, and he muttered to himself. "I've searched high and low for it, only to find it by sheer luck." Noah did not expect that the strongest group of thugs in the Yakuza would actually send themselves to his doorstep. There was really nothing better than this. Therefore, Noah laughed, laughing very happily. That laughter made Jialuo's laughter stop abruptly. Slowly withdrawing the smile on his face, Jia Luo looked at Noah. His eyes were like those of a fugitive, full of ruthlessness. Kid, you've been tricked into coming here, and you can still laugh. Why can't I laugh? Noah shrugged and glanced at Stefan. If I really only found out now that I've been tricked, perhaps I would be very surprised. However, I'll have to trouble you to find someone with better means to trick me next time. Let that pig over there strut around in front of me. If it weren't for my patience, I would have laughed my lungs out long ago. You. What did you say? Stefan's fat face instantly turned the color of a pig's liver due to his anger. You said I'm a pig. What? Don't tell me that people in this world don't have the habit of calling those who are so stupid that they have no bottom line as pigs. Noah laughed out loud. Moreover, not only is your brain as stupid as a pig, even the fat on your body is no different from a pig's. Then, if you're not a pig, what is a pig? You. Stefan was so angry that his hand trembled as he pointed at Noah. Chapter 12:11. Noah's words caused Jia Luo's eyebrows to twitch slightly as he said this with a hidden meaning. He seemed to be implying something as he said, Kid, don't you know what kind of business we, the Hatchy Fingers, do? What kind of business? Noah also raised his eyebrows, but replied nonchalantly. I heard that the Hatchy Fingers has 8 departments that are involved in different businesses, including slave trading, assassination, smuggling, theft, drug dealing, bodyguarding, finance, and gambling. There are a total of 8 types of businesses, each of which can't see the light of day. That's right. Jia Luo didn't seem to mind Noah's sarcasm as he continued speaking. And the business that we, the Hatchy Finger Security Department, are in charge of is bodyguarding. Bodyguards. Noah looked around at the criminals with malicious smiles on their faces. He couldn't help but twitch his mouth. And then? What does that have to do with you bringing me to this place? Didn't I say just now? You're our big client, right? Jia Luo stretched out a hand and clenched it into a fist bit by bit as if he was pulling a finger. That hand made cracking sounds as he grinned. You've sold so much steel, I'm sure you've earned quite a bit. In the eyes of many, you're a fat sheep that can't get any fatter. Furthermore, the security of the kingdom isn't very good. Kid, don't tell me you've never thought of hiring some bodyguards. Hearing this, Noah narrowed his eyes. He finally understood Jia Luo's motive. Simply put, this guy wanted to collect the so-called protection fee from Noah. Furthermore, it was the type that couldn't be resisted. Since you know about the 6 arms, then you should also know about our capabilities, right? Jia Luo grinned maliciously at Noah. As long as you cooperate with me, I guarantee that your future path will be very smooth. No one will have any ideas about you. How about that? Oh. Noah's expression didn't change as he replied indifferently. Then, how much do I have to pay to hire the Hatchy Fingers Security Department? Not much. Jia Luo looked straight at Noah, his eyes revealing the ferocity of a ferocious beast staring at its prey. How much did you earn in the capital? I want 80% of it. Consider it a friendly price. As soon as these words were said, the surrounding outlaws immediately laughed one by one. On the other side, although Stefan was still enraged by Noah's words, he felt that his hatred had been vented. 80%. That wasn't a collaboration at all, but exploitation, right? With the amount of steel that Noah sold, 80% of the profits was enough to buy 1 or 2 pieces of land, not to mention hiring bodyguards. Under such circumstances, did Jia Luo intend to take away 80%? Even asking for an exorbitant price was not enough to describe his greed. Noah knew this, Stark knew this, and Jia Luo himself naturally knew this as well. However, Jia Luo had never thought of hiding anything. What? Can't accept it. Jia Luo sneered. It's best if you accept it. That way, you can at least take the remaining 20% and return home safely. There was no need to confirm what he meant. Jia Luo gave Noah only two choices. One was to obediently hand over the 80% of the profits from selling the steel. In that case, Noah would be able to take the remaining 20% and leave the imperial city safely. The other was to reject the so-called collaboration. That way, everyone present could guarantee that when night fell, a person selling steel in large quantities would disappear without a trace, and all the money he earned would go into Jia Luo's pocket. That was all there was to it. This was the Hatchy Fingers. They were the largest criminal syndicate in the kingdom of Yestage. The surrounding atmosphere suddenly became sinister due to Jia Luo's undisguised malice. The repulsive outlaws slowly took a step closer to Noah with sinister smiles on their faces. Stark, on the other hand, took a step back and looked at Noah with delight in his eyes. Jia Luo, on the other hand, stood motionless with the other 5 members of the 6 arms. They had cold smiles on their faces, looking as if they had Noah in their grasp. If it had been anyone else, even Gu Jiefu, in such a situation, they would have felt a sense of despair. The guards of the Hatchy Fingers were the hired thugs of the largest criminal syndicate in the kingdom. It was definitely possible to say that there were many experts within. At least, there wasn't a single person in this courtyard who was below level 10. The weakest one was comparable to a silver-level adventurer. Furthermore, the 6 arms led by Jia Luo were all existences comparable to the highest-level adventurers of the fine steel level. They were at least level 29. Even Gu Jiefu would have to bear a grudge against all the members of the 6 arms. In addition to the pawns around them, who wouldn't feel despair in the kingdom. Unfortunately, in the face of such a situation, Noah only looked at Jia Luo in front of him. After a while, he finally sighed and said this. Ignorance is definitely not a mistake, but when ignorance reaches a certain level, even if it's not a mistake, it's so stupid that it's laughable. The cold smile on Jia Luo's face froze slightly. He slowly withdrew it, and a murderous look appeared in his eyes. Kid, are you courting death? Noah glanced at Jia Luo. Then, he suddenly smiled as if he had thought of something. Do you really want me to hire you as my bodyguards? Ha! Jia Luo's expression darkened, and there was some anger in his tone. We've already come to this point. What else do you want to say? I want to say that it's not impossible to hire you as my bodyguards, Noah said as he spread out his hands. However, you also said that the kingdom's security isn't good. Since I want to hire bodyguards, I don't need those incompetent idiots. So? Jia Luo was so angry that he laughed. Are you saying that we're all incompetent idiots in your eyes? Because of his fury, Jia Luo's body was already erupting with an extremely ferocious aura. He was like a terrifying beast, incomparably frightening. It wasn't just Jia Luo. Even the rest of the 6 arms people had faces full of anger, and their bodies more or less released an astonishing aura. However, in the face of that ferocious aura that was enough to make an ordinary person's legs go soft, Noah's expression was calm as he continued to speak. Whether we're incompetent idiots or not, we'll know once we give it a try. After saying that, Noah ignored the furious looks on Jia Luo's and the rest's faces and spoke indifferently without turning his head. Annabelle. Yes. Annabelle looked as if she had been waiting for Noah's call for a long time. She raised her head and walked in front of Noah with a frosty expression. Looking at the cold-faced Annabelle, the surrounding outlaws were startled at first, but soon after, their faces revealed an evil expression at the same time. That expression was simply as if they were looking at a delicious meal. Only Jia Luo looked at Noah with a gloomy expression and spoke in a deep voice. What exactly do you want? From Jia Luo's incomparably gloomy expression and extremely oppressive voice, it could be felt that this underworld leader was about to reach the limit of his patience. Unfortunately, Noah was still trampling on this limit. This is my follower. As for her name, there's no need to specifically say. Noah faintly smiled. As you can see, my safety is in Annabelle's charge. What you want to snatch away is her job. Since that's the case, I'll give you a chance. Noah pointed at Annabelle and spoke with a mocking expression. As long as you can defeat my follower, I'll do as you wish and obediently offer you what you want. Moreover, it's not just 80%, but 100% of everything. The entire crowd suddenly went silent. Ha! Ha ha ha! Ha 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 ha! Jiao Luo suddenly laughed out loud. There wasn't the slightest bit of amusement in that laughter. There was only anger that made one's heart tremble. Very good, boy. You've successfully angered me. Jiao Luo roared. Since that's the case, I'll first torture this woman, then cut you into 1,000 pieces, and then throw you all into the dungeon to feed the worms. Jiao Luo's words elicited a reaction from Annabelle. Worms? Annabelle suddenly raised her head, her eyes surging with an astonishingly cold light. To me, you're all worms, a group of inferior human beings. As soon as she finished speaking, Annabelle fiercely spread out her hands, and the palms of both hands burst out with dazzling electric light, turning into 2 huge electric balls. Second-level magic enhancement, electric shock ball. Chapter 12:12. Pang! When the explosion that was mixed with violent electric currents shook the entire courtyard of the Hatchibyunga Guard Department, the astonishing impact carried rioting electric sparks and spread out in all directions. Beep beep. At the center of the impact, violent electric arcs jumped back and forth like streaks of lightning, running back and forth in the space as if they were boiling. Ah! Those outlaws who didn't have time to react were all covered by the violent electric arcs that ran back and forth like lightning. Their bodies emitted a burnt smell as they let out mournful screams. Instantly, in the entire courtyard, those thugs from the Hakihoshu Guard Department, who were feared by everyone, were all roasted by the violent electric arcs. They fell to the ground one after another, never to get up again. Only the group of 6 arms, led by Jiao Luo, reacted at the critical moment, and all of them retreated rapidly, avoiding the violent impact and electric currents that came head-on. Thus, when the violent shock waves and arcs of lightning that shook the entire courtyard gradually subsided and the surroundings regained its tranquility, apart from Jiao Luo's group of 6 adventurers who could match the highest level of fine steel rank, the others all fell to the ground, their bodies twitching incessantly. Looking at this scene, Annabelle, who still had her hands spread open and some electric arcs flickering in her palms, spoke with contempt. They're just like frogs. This sentence completely infuriated Jiao Luo's group. This was especially so for the only female among the 6 arms called Odessa. When she saw the disdain on Annabelle's stunning beauty, the jealousy in her heart triggered a strong anger, causing Odessa to fiercely slap the scimitar at her waist. Following Estrian's action, the 6 scimitars hanging on her waist suddenly floated up on their own, as if there were 6 invisible people holding those scimitars. They extremely nimbly drew a perfect trajectory around Estrian's body and violently swept out. Shio 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 shio. The scimitars that were flickering with a deadly cold light cut through the space, and with a sharp sound, they mercilessly slashed at Annabelle from 6 completely different directions. Seeing those scimitars mercilessly slashing at her, Annabelle just opened her red lips slightly. Shield wall. A flash of light rose from Annabelle's body, as if turning into an invisible mirror, enveloping Annabelle's whole body. Clang 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 clang. With a sharp sound, the 6 scimitars slashed at the invisible mirror like flash one by one, causing a crisp sound of collision, and they were knocked away one by one. Seeing this scene, the expressions of the group of 6 arms, led by Jiao Luo, changed. The spell called Shield Wall was a very common type of physical defense spell. However, common meant that it wasn't very special, and its rank was not very high. Very high. At the very least, a defensive magic of this rank should be easily broken by Edstelin's strength. However, Edstelin's attack didn't even cause the slightest bit of damage. What did that prove? It proved that Annabelle's strength was far beyond that of a magic of this rank, so she was able to allocate a large amount of mana to increase the defensive power of the shield wall. And to be able to so easily block the attack of Edstelin, one of the 6 arms, with a low-level magic, meant that Annabelle's strength wasn't inferior to Edstelin's. So that's how it is. Another person who can match a fine steel adventurer. Xiao Luo's face was gloomy. This is what you're counting on. Xiao Luo stared at Annabelle, and after adjusting his body slightly, he abruptly stomped his feet on the ground. With a loud bang, Xiao Luo seemed to have turned into a ferocious beast, charging straight at Annabelle. Then let me show you who's the useless idiot. After saying that, Xiao Luo was in midair, but he clenched his fist fiercely. The muscles on his arm bulged explosively, and even ferocious blue veins appeared. He suddenly punched at Annabelle. Wherever the fist passed, the air waves in the surrounding space rolled back and forth, bringing about a sonic boom. The momentum was not small. It was just an ordinary punch, but it was able to reach such a level. Noah's eyes flashed as he watched from behind. A warrior monk. That's right. Xiao Luo's profession was a warrior monk. Moreover, he was a powerful warrior monk who had at least trained his body to the extent of being as hard as mithril. Therefore, if Annabelle used the shield wall to defend against this punch, it would definitely be shattered in an instant, and she would even be severely injured. Knowing this, Annabelle still didn't move an inch. She only looked at the approaching Xiao Luo with a ferocious expression, and slowly extended a finger. Lightning strike. A dazzling electric arc suddenly flickered from the tip of Annabelle's finger. Finally, like lightning, it shot violently at Xiao Luo, who was still in midair. A trifling third-rank spell. Xiao Luo roared angrily. Don't underestimate me. With a furious roar, Xiao Luo directly punched at the lightning that shot violently at him. He actually didn't dodge or evade the spell, using his body to meet it. Bang! Along with the collision between the fist and the lightning, an astonishing impact once again appeared in midair. It was as if a substantial wave of wind had appeared, causing ripples in the air. It was also at this moment that a phantom suddenly flashed behind Annabelle. Like a mirage, it emerged from illusion to reality. It was an illusion. A spell specially used to confuse people's vision. The person who used it was one of the 6 arms, Dune Lunt. With a sinister smile, Dune Lunt fiercely pulled out the long sword at his waist. Take her down. The long sword tore through the air and suddenly slashed fiercely at Annabelle's neck. Feeling the tearing sound of the wind behind her, Annabelle's eyes narrowed. Dimensional movement. The next moment, Annabelle's figure suddenly disappeared from where she was, causing Dune Lunt's determined sword to hit empty air. Wah! Dune Lunt was astonished. However, no matter how astonished he was at this moment, he had already exposed his biggest flaw. Poochie! With a tearing sound, a long sword pierced through Dune Lunt's chest, bringing with it dark red blood that splashed all over the ground. Scashalon's eyes bulged. His neck seemed to have been wound up as he lowered his head stiffly. When he saw the long sword that had pierced through his chest, blood flowed out from the corner of his mouth. He squeezed out a voice with great difficulty. No, this was Dune Lunt's last regret. Then, the long sword was pulled out fiercely, causing Dune Lunt to fall to the ground, revealing Annabelle's figure standing behind him. Looking at Dune Lunt, who was sprawled on the ground with his arms and legs spread out, and the ground beneath him was gradually dyed red with blood, Annabelle murmured expressionlessly. Is it a beetle this time? It was indeed true. Dune Lunt's appearance of lying on the ground with his arms and legs spread out was exactly the same as a beetle. Seeing Dune Lunt die in front of them, the members of 6 Arms, including Jia, were all stunned for a moment. It's too troublesome to deal with them one by one. We can't let Sir Noah wait for too long. Annabelle raised her eyes and looked ahead. Then, let's deal with them once and for all. While saying this, Annabelle clapped her hands fiercely in the midst of a paw sound. Hum. A burst of terrifying magic power burst out from Annabelle's body. Then, Annabelle slowly opened her palms. Beep, beep, beep. A white lightning arc like a flood dragon flickered between Annabelle's palms. On it, a dazzling white light bloomed, illuminating the entire surrounding space. Magic enhancement chain dragon thunder. In the next instant, a white arc of lightning shot up into the sky from Annabelle's palm, hovering in the air. Soon after, like a dragon descending from the sky, it brought along a dazzling white light as it rubbed against the air, heavily landing at the position of the 6 arms members who couldn't react in time. Boom! A thunderous sound resounded through the sky. Chapter 12-13. When the dragon-like arcs of lightning landed heavily in the courtyard, almost everyone in the royal city saw this scene. However, in the eyes of others, it was nothing more than a bolt of lightning. Such a bolt of lightning shattered the ground of the courtyard of the Hatchabunga Guard Department, causing a violent impact that blew up inch by inch of the ground. The soil was dug up, and the gravel was splashed up. A large number of arcs of lightning were like crazy pythons, scurrying back and forth. The entire space was shrouded in dazzling lightning. No one knew how long this scene lasted. After a long time, when the dazzling white light that shrouded the entire space slowly faded away, the violent impact and crazy arcs of lightning that acted in the space also subsided little by little. The originally well-decorated courtyard had already changed its appearance greatly. A pit appeared on the ground. With Jia as the leader, Dianok, Estrian, Mamvisht, Peshlian, and even Schlund, who was stabbed in the chest by Annabelle and died, were all lying in this pit. Occasionally, 1 or 2 electric currents would run through their bodies. Every time an electric current ran through this group of people, their bodies would jump a little, as if they were lying on the ground and bouncing their bodies slightly. Seeing this, Annabelle, who was standing in front of the pit, said sarcastically, "They really do look like fleas." After saying that, Annabelle directly turned around and walked in the direction of Noah. From the beginning to the end, it could be said that Annabelle didn't look directly at the group of strong people who were said to be comparable to the highest level of human fine steel adventurers. Under such circumstances, from the time Noah sent Annabelle to fight, to the time when the strongest fighters of the Hatchabunga Guard were all defeated, the whole process didn't even take 5 minutes. In just 5 minutes, even Gu Jifu, who had the title of the strongest warrior in the kingdom, and Sungqiang, who was also a fine steel adventurer, had to pay attention to 6 arms, but in Annabelle's hands, they were easily defeated. The reason was very simple. The magic that Annabelle used was called Chain Dragon Lightning, which was magic above the 7th rank. As for magic spells above the 7th level, that was a mythical realm that humans could not touch. Even if Jia Luo and his party were known as elite steel-tier adventurers, as long as they were humans, they could only nurse a grievance when faced with magic that humans were unable to touch. Even if there were 10 more fine steel adventurers, it would still be the same. He believed that if this matter was publicized, 99 out of 100 people would choose to laugh it off and think that it was just a rumor. The remaining one would only be skeptical, right? But for Annabelle, the person in question, this was nothing more than that. "My apologies, Lord Noah." Annabelle's cold and emotionless appearance completely melted in front of Noah, turning into a respect that could drive people crazy. "I spent some time on those insects. There's nothing to apologize for, Annabelle." Noah smiled at Annabelle. "You've done well. Thank you for your hard work." "Yes." Only then did Annabelle feel relieved. Noah cast his gaze into the pit and looked at Jia Luo, who was lying on the ground with 1 or 2 electric currents running through his body from time to time. He curled his lips and said, "Now, do you know who's the useless idiot?" In the pit, Jiao Luo's body jerked violently in a way that it had not done before. In response, Noah did not even look at it and turned around directly. "This is probably the headquarters of the Yakumo garrison. Let's search here and we should be able to get a lot of rewards." "Yes, Lord Noah." Annabelle nodded obediently. Just as Annabelle was about to follow behind Noah and leave the scene together, her expression suddenly changed. Bang! Following a muffled stomping sound, Jiao Luo, who was originally lying on the ground, suddenly leaped up like a prostrating cheetah. Bouncing his body up, the aura on his body abruptly surged as his figure violently rushed out. Moreover, it was in the direction of Noah. As the leader of the 6 arms that was comparable to a fine steel adventurer, Jiao Luo's strength was naturally the strongest in the 6 arms. Jiao Luo was confident that even if he were to face the kingdom's strongest warrior, Gu Jiefu, he would definitely not lose. However, today, Jiao Luo and all the other members of the 6 arms couldn't even last 5 minutes against Annabelle. Coupled with the chain dragon thunder, just now, Jiao Luo knew that even if he were to risk his life, he would definitely not be a match for Annabelle. Jiao Luo was naturally filled with disbelief about Annabelle's strength. However, compared to disbelief, Jiao Luo's heart was filled with hatred for Noah, who had looked down on him from beginning to end and treated him like a fool, making him behave like a clown. Driven by hatred, Jiao Luo turned into a desperado. He did not care about Annabelle, who was still by Noah's side, and stared fixedly at Noah, who was getting closer and closer. The blood at the corner of his mouth rendered his face extremely sinister as he roared hysterically. "Even if I die, I'll drag you down to hell with me." The distance between him and Noah was instantly reduced to 0. Jiao Luo clenched his fists tightly, condensing an extremely terrifying force in his fists, and blasted it violently at Noah. This punch brought about a strong oppressive wind. The strong wind blew the fringe in front of Noah's forehead, exposing a pair of deep, dark eyes to Jiao Luo's distorted vision due to extreme hatred. However, Jiao Luo simply could not see the excessive hatred. In the face of what could be said to be the most powerful attack of his life, Noah's pitch-black eyes did not show any fear, panic, or even the slightest fluctuation. There was only complete and utter calmness. Bang! A muffled sound that made one's heart contract abruptly reverberated through the entire surrounding space, causing a ring of shockwaves to spread out like sound waves, rippling through the extremely dilapidated courtyard. At this moment, Jiao Luo, who had unleashed the most powerful punch of his life, slowly narrowed his eyes until they were the size of a needle tip. This was because that blow, which was enough to shatter a huge rock, had been easily blocked by a hand and grasped in the palm of his hand. "You seem to have misunderstood something, right?" Following this calm voice, the hand that had easily received Jiao Luo's strongest punch slowly clenched, tightly clenching Jiao Luo's fist within. "When I said that you're a useless idiot, I didn't mean that my follower could casually defeat you." Saying this, Noah's gaze met Jiao Luo's pupils, which had shrunk to the size of a needle tip, and he sneered. "Rather, to me, you're indeed only at this level, idiot." After saying this, Noah's other hand suddenly clenched into a fist. Clang! Streaks of electrical lines crawled up Noah's tightly clenched fist. Whang! A resplendent vortex of air vibrated from Noah's tightly clenched fist. In the instant that Jiao Luo was completely unable to react, a fist that was even more terrifying than the most powerful punch of his life cut through the air and landed directly on Jiao Luo's body. Bang! Amidst the sound of an explosion, Jiao Luo's entire body exploded like an overinflated balloon under that terrifying punch, causing large amounts of blood, flesh, bones, and internal organs to splatter in all directions. Just one blow. Jiao Luo, whose strength was comparable to the kingdom's strongest warrior, Gu Jiefu, died without a complete corpse. This was the power of Noah's punch that had reached LV4, and his all-around strength was at the stage of SSS. After being strengthened by enhanced magic, he used Annihilation Strike to display the power of Noah's punch. Ah! A blood-curdling scream rang out. That wasn't the voice of Jialuo, whose body was smashed to pieces. Instead, it was the voice of the guy who had luckily escaped Annabelle's purge and was still hiding. Only to see that behind the rockery in the courtyard, Stoffen was paralyzed on the ground, screaming miserably with a face full of horror. Recalling Stoffen's despicable behavior and the obscene look he had when he looked at her, Annabelle spoke in a low voice. "Lord Noah, how should we deal with that scarab?" Noah glanced at Staven, who was screaming in pain, and turned around. "As you like." Annabelle suddenly smiled. That was an extremely cruel smile, like that of a demon. Chapter 12:14. 3 days later, the biggest underground criminal organization in the kingdom, the headquarters of the 8 departments of the organization known as the Hachibana, were all defeated. There was no suspense at all. As the strongest fighters of the Hachibana, the biggest underground criminal organization, those 6 armed members who were comparable to fine steel-level adventurers had all lost their lives in the hands of Noah and Annabelle. A large number of strong fighters in the Hachibana's security department were also all wiped out by Annabelle's magic on that day. After losing these forces, no matter how deep the Hachibana infiltrated the kingdom, under the situation where even the intelligence of their headquarters had been exposed, it was naturally impossible for them to resist the attacks of the fine steel-level adventurers of the Wild Rose Gang. Therefore, almost on the second day after the intelligence was deciphered, Agagase, Ibirui, Gragland, Hina, T and even Gujifu's group split into 6 groups, and with the strongest vanguard, they quickly destroyed 6 of the Hachibana's departments. As for the remaining 2 departments, one was sent by Noah and Annabelle to destroy, while the other was the courtyard where Jia Luo and the other members of the security department were at that day. Since Noah had already taken care of it, there was no need to destroy it. Therefore, in just 3 days, the headquarters of the 8 departments of the Hachibana were all defeated. And just like Agagase's plan from the start. After the 8 headquarters of the Hachibana were all defeated, the panicking managers of the departments could only helplessly seek help from the nobles who were in cahoots with them. In the end, Princess Lana, who had been keeping an eye on the nobles, successfully followed the vine and found the locations of the managers of the other 7 departments other than Jialuo. Then, the people of the Wild Rose Gang acted and took down all of them. At this point, the Hachibana, the biggest underground criminal organization in the kingdom, was almost completely wiped out. The reason why the word almost was used to describe it was because, other than the headquarters of the 8 departments, the Hachibana definitely had some small strongholds set up in the territories of the other nobles, just like the village where they cultivated the raw materials for the drugs. Those small strongholds had not been wiped out yet. Therefore, even if the managers and headquarters of the 8 departments of the Yakuza were all defeated, the leaders of the remaining small strongholds would still take advantage of their territories, and with the help of the nobles who were in cahoots with them, they could barely maintain their existence. Even so, the power of the Hachibana had been greatly weakened, and its influence on the kingdom had also been greatly reduced. If Princess Lana was smart enough, it shouldn't be difficult to find an opportunity to eliminate these fish that escaped the net. However, that had nothing to do with Noah. According to the agreement, Noah's assistance would only last until the managers and headquarters of the 8 departments of the Yakuza were all captured. If this assistance was maintained until the entire Hachi Fingers was defeated, who knew how long it would take to find all the fish that had escaped the net? Because of this, Haggis and the others weren't so thick-skinned as to ask Noah to stay in the capital for the sake of some fish that slipped through the net. In other words, the matter of dealing with the Hachibana had come to an end. As for the gains, they were not small at all. According to the previous agreement, after the headquarters of the 8 departments of the Hachibana were defeated, the stolen goods that were collected would all belong to Noah. After checking, Noah realized that these gains were more than 10 times more than what he got from selling large amounts of stainless steel. After all, most of the business that the headquarters of the 8 departments of the Hachibana had done so far was here, so how could it not be a lot? After a few days of hard work, he was able to get this kind of gains, so Noah was quite satisfied. Not to mention the gains in terms of money, just the gains from the rest of the materials that he planned to use to make equipment, tools, and other items were already considered a huge amount of resources. With these, he would definitely be able to make quite a number of magical tools with miraculous effects in the underground tomb of Nasarek, which would be of great help. Originally, Noah only planned to earn some money on this trip to see if he could use it to pay for the maintenance of the underground tomb of Nasarek. Now, with so many unexpected gains, if he was still not satisfied, then he would be too greedy. Under such circumstances, Noah felt that it was time for him to leave the capital and return to the underground tomb of Nasarek. "You're leaving." In the hall of Gudjefu's mansion, with Gudjefu and Gudjefu as the leaders, a group of powerhouses of the highest level in the kingdom all revealed shocked expressions. "What's so strange about it?" Noah said helplessly. "I came to the capital to do business, and not to settle down. Now that I've achieved my goal, there's nothing strange about leaving here, right? But, if you're leaving, Mr. Noah is planning to return to Yelantir, right?" Gudjefu frowned slightly. Compared to Yelantir, the capital should be more suitable for Mr. Noah to live in, right? Is this place more suitable for people to live in than Yelantir? Noah looked at Gudjefu. Perhaps, as the capital of the kingdom of Ristage, this place is indeed more attractive than the cities at the border, but it's not necessarily suitable for people to live in, right? Hearing that, Gudjefu was speechless. In the courtyard, Noah raised his head and looked at the bright full moon in the sky. His expression was more or less peaceful. "No matter which world it is, the moon will be full sometimes." This sentence was heard by someone who happened to pass by. "You say that as if you have been to other worlds." Noah's eyes flashed slightly. Chapter 12:15. The voice behind him made Noah, who was looking at the bright moon in the sky, slowly turn around and look at the source of the voice. Over there, Ibirua was dressed in a black robe as usual. She wore a mask that completely covered her entire body like the grim reaper of the night. She hugged her arms and leaned against the wall. Her gaze seemed to be cast on Noah. She just stared at Noah and said as she spoke, "However, even if you really came from another world, I wouldn't be surprised at all." Hearing this, Noah nodded, turned around again, looked at the moon in the sky, and said, "Maybe, I'm really not from this world, that's hard to say." Obviously, Noah thought Ibiruai's words were an exaggeration. After all, for Ibiruai, Noah's power was indeed beyond the reach of a human. Then, under such circumstances, it wasn't strange for Ibiruai to say such a thing. In view of this, Noah followed Ibiruai's words and half-jokingly told the truth. Noah didn't know this. What Ibiruai said next was very important to Noah. Looking at Noah's back facing her, looking at the bright moon in the sky, his robe fluttering in the night wind, creating an exceptionally beautiful scene, Ibiruai hesitated. After a while, Ibiruai seemed to have made up her mind and finally asked such a question. "Hey, you're not a god, are you?" "God?" Noah turned his head and looked at Ibiruai with some confusion. "What is that? You don't know? Could it be that you are not a god?" Ibirui asked thoughtfully. "No, maybe even you don't know that you're a god, that's hard to say." Seeing that Ibirui had fallen into a state of soliloquy, Noah felt a little puzzled. Can you not say things that others don't understand? Just as Noah was about to say those words, an unexpected impact hit Noah with Ibirua's next sentence. Raising her youthful face that could be imagined even if she couldn't see it, Elbera looked straight at Noah. After a moment of consideration, she said so. You. Are you a player? Hearing this, Noah's eyes suddenly narrowed. He suddenly raised his head and looked at Ibirua. Just now, what did this vampire girl say? Players. It was indeed the players, wasn't it? Looking at Noah's sudden strong reaction, Ibirua's hands tightened little by little. Her voice was filled with an unimaginable uneasiness and solemnity. I knew it. You really are a player. I knew it. It's impossible for an ordinary human to possess such powerful strength. Unless you are a player from another world or a descendant who has inherited the bloodline of these players. A player from another world. Hearing Ibirua's words, Noah's eyes couldn't help but flicker. If it wasn't for the unstable emotions that caused his mana to go berserk when he was young, Noah would have cultivated a calmer state of mind in critical moments. But now, he couldn't help but be shaken, right? At this time, Noah only had one question in his mind. That is, does the so-called player that Ibirua mentioned match the first thought that came to his mind when he first heard this word? So, Noah took a deep breath, calmed down, and looked straight at Ibirua. What do you mean by player? Noah's words made Ibirua frown. At this point, are you still going to hide it? There's something wrong with what you just said, Noah said calmly. First of all, I really don't know what you mean by player. Liar. Ibirua directly refuted. Your performance just now clearly shows that you know about the existence of players. Indeed, I know of a type of existence known as the players. Noah looked at Ibirua. But, I don't know if the players I know are the same as the players you know. Ibirua was a little surprised. Don't tell me you don't know about the existence of other players. Other players. Noah narrowed his eyes and shook his head. Impossible. If it's the type of player I know, then there shouldn't be any other similar existence in this world. Why did the two Manasarek transmigrate from the game Yggdrasil to this world? Because of the connection between the two worlds, the data in YGG-SELL, which should have been in the other world, flowed into this world, and in the process, completed the materialization. According to what Gaia and Alea said, before the two Manasarek transmigrated to this world, there was indeed a player from Yggdrasil that came with it. However, that player should have been intercepted by Gaia and Alea. Then, there shouldn't be a player from Yggdrasil in this world. Although that was what he said, the more Noah thought about it, the more he felt that something was wrong. Come to think of it, they were clearly two completely different worlds. Why did this world have so many similarities with YGG-SELL? In YGG-SELL, there were so-called professions. In this world, there were also so-called professions. In YGG-SELL, there was magic. In this world, there were many spells similar to YGG-SELL. Even the magical items from Yggdrasil had appeared in this world. For example, the magic sealing crystal that Noah obtained from the sunlight scripture Purgatory was a magic item from YGG-SELL. Why did these two completely different worlds have so many similarities? This was not a parallel world like Aslan or Edris, nor was it a world of different species like the world of humans and the world of elemental fairies. This was a world that was completely separated, two worlds that existed independently in the between the worlds. Logically speaking, there shouldn't be so many similarities between these two worlds, right? Could it be that in this world, there really were other players from YGG-SELL? Undoubtedly, Gaia and Alea said that there was only one player that could come to this world, and that player was also intercepted. What was going on? Looks like you really don't know about the existence of other players. Chapter 12:16. From the information obtained from the Sunshine Scripture, Noah learned about the existence of the 6 great gods. It was said that they suddenly appeared in this world hundreds of years ago and were worshipped by the people of the Celian theocracy. From various rumors, Noah also learned about the existence of the 8 Desires King and the demon god. Legend had it that the 8 Desires King was a great existence of unknown origin. He suddenly appeared in this world and used his unparalleled power to temporarily dominate the entire world. As for the demon god, he was also a kind of evil person who suddenly appeared in this world and brought great disaster to this world. He was defeated by the existence of the 13 heroes. Whether it was the 6 great gods, the 8 Desires King, or the demon god, they were all characters that only existed in human myths and legends. However, these characters that appeared in myths and legends all had one thing in common that could not be ignored. That is, they all appeared in this world very suddenly. Moreover, before they appeared, there were no signs of them. Originally, Noah only treated these as myths and legends. However, if it was really like what Ibirua said, whether it was the 6 great gods, the 8 Desires King, or the demon god, they were all players, then this matter made sense. The reason why they suddenly appeared was because they did not belong to this world. The reason why they had such great divine power was because their level was higher than the highest level in this world, which was only level 35 in the hero domain. The reason why there were many professions and magic that were similar to those in Yggdrasil was because these players brought the professions and magic from Yggdrasil to this world and taught them to the people of this world. The reason why the Sunshine Scripture had the items from Yggdrasil was because the 6 great gods who left these items behind were players from Yggdrasil. All these signs pointed to the fact that players from Yggdrasil had appeared more than once in this world where players from Yggdrasil should not exist. Phew, Noah exhaled deeply, calming down his somewhat chaotic emotions. He immediately raised his eyes, looked at Ibirua, and solemnly said, "Thank you for telling me such important information. This is not worthy of your special thanks." Ibirua was startled at first. She did not expect Noah to suddenly thank her so solemnly. She tilted her head in confusion and asked, "Then, you are a player, right?" "You can say so." Noah smiled bitterly. "At least, I am not from this world." As expected. Ibirua looked at Noah in a completely different way. "Looking at you, you seem to have just arrived in this world not long ago. You are not very familiar with this world, right? Once you are familiar with this world, what do you plan to do with it?" But Ibirua did not say this last sentence. However, this was what Ibirua was the most. There was no other way. The descent of the 6 great gods into this world led to the emergence of the Lien cult nation, a nation that rejected all races other than humans and advocated the supremacy of humans. The 8 Desires King had King of 8 Desires King came to this world. The demon god of kings of gods, and brought unimaginable disasters gods. Every time a player came, they would have a great impact on this world. Then, as a player, what does Noah plan to do with this world after coming to this world? Is he going to become a religion like the 6 great gods and build a human country? Is he going to sweep away thousands of armies and rule the world like the 8 Desires King? Or is he going to bring unimaginable disasters to the world like the demon god of gods? Ibirua realized that this seemingly ordinary human in front of her could change this world greatly with just a thought. Is this change good or bad? If she did not confirm it, who would be at ease? As if seeing through the uneasiness and solemnity in Ibirua's heart, Noah sighed and turned around. "You don't have to worry. As long as the people of this world do not provoke me, then I will not do anything to the people of this world." This answer made Ibirua's uneasiness even more intense. So, Ibirua could not help but say, "Then what if someone provokes you?" Noah glanced at Ibirua and said indifferently, "If there's a grudge, then there's a grudge. If there's a grudge, then there's a grudge, right?" This sentence sent a chill down Ibirua's spine. The meaning of Noah's words could not be clearer. As long as they don't provoke him, then he will not come looking for trouble. However, as long as they provoked him, he would not show them any mercy. Ibirua felt that she really needed to tell Hagis and Gudjifu not to provoke Noah for the sake of the kingdom's interests. Otherwise, this corrupt country with internal and external troubles will really be finished. So, Ibirua took a deep breath and asked tentatively. Apart from you, this time, are there any other players who came to this world with you? No. Noah said bluntly. Apart from me, there are only a few of my subordinates who came with me. They are not players, but something similar to summon monsters. As long as I don't allow it, they will not casually participate in the disputes of this world. Is that so? Eleanor sighed in relief and nodded. I understand. I hope one day you will not become an enemy of humanity. Enemy of humanity? Noah looked at Ibirua with a half-smile. As an undying, you're quite fond of humans. Is that so? Ibirua said, not to be outdone. As a human, don't you get along well with the other races? Noah shrugged and didn't say anything else. Seeing this, Ibirua also tactfully shut her mouth. She took a deep look at Noah's back before quietly retreating. Only Noah was left. He continued to look at the bright moon in the sky, but his mood was no longer as relaxed as before. Instead, it was full of thoughts. Looks like it is necessary to talk to Gaia and Alea about this matter. Why were there so many Yggdrasil players in this world that had once descended into this world? Noah really couldn't answer this question alone. Only Gaia and Alea could give an affirmative answer based on this matter. Just when Noah was lost in thought, an aura suddenly approached Noah at an extremely fast speed. Noah, who was awakened from his thoughts, turned his head in surprise and looked at the entrance of the courtyard. There, like a ninja, Annabelle suddenly descended from the sky and knelt on one knee on the ground, looking at Noah. At this moment, Annabelle's beautiful face was filled with unprecedented worry. Then, Annabelle spoke hesitantly with such worry in her voice. Sir Noah, Sir Yaerbade has just sent a message. Yaerbade? Noah clearly noticed the worry on Annabelle's pretty face, and an ominous premonition rose in his heart. What did Yaerbade say? Annabelle parted her red lips and opened her mouth slightly, but it seemed that there was something that she couldn't say out loud. She also seemed to be worried that Noah would be angry if she said it out loud. She couldn't say anything for a while. That performance made the ominous premonition in Noah's heart even stronger. What's wrong? Noah looked at Annabelle closely. Is it something you can't tell me? Annabelle bit her lips, and after a long while, she finally spoke with some difficulty. Sir Zatia rebelled. Noah's face suddenly sank. Nasaric Underground Tomb, Basement 10. Noah, who used the ability of Anzuar, Ring of Respect to teleport back to the Nasaric Underground Tomb, opened the door of the room in front of the throne room that couldn't be directly teleported to, and walked out. Outside the door, led by Yaerbade, Yon, Mare, Cossitz, Demiyugos, and other guardians were all present. Even Sebastian and the rest of the combat maids were here. Sir Noah. A group of NPCs in the Nasaric Underground Tomb all knelt on one knee and bowed their noblest heads to Noah. Chapter 12:17. There was an unbearable stifling atmosphere in the air. Looking at the NPCs kneeling on one knee in front of him with their heads lowered, not even daring to breathe loudly, Noah could clearly feel the deep uneasiness hidden in their hearts. That uneasiness was mainly directed at Noah. Moreover, rather than uneasiness, it was more like fear. Of course, what the NPCs of the underground tomb were afraid of was not Noah, but whether or not Noah would be disappointed in them. After spending some time together, Noah had a deep understanding of the loyalty of these NPCs. To these NPCs, Noah, the supreme ruler of the great underground tomb of Nasaric, was everything. The strong loyalty that no one could compare to made these NPCs care about Noah to the extreme. If Noah doubted or was disappointed in the NPCs of the underground tomb because of Satya's rebellion, it would definitely be worse than death for these NPCs. It was precisely because he knew this that Noah felt that it was really inconceivable. As a guardian of the highest level of loyalty to Noah, how could Satya rebel? With such feelings, Noah looked at the NPCs of the underground tomb, who did not even dare to breathe loudly, and sighed. Alright, you don't have to be so worried. Satya is Satya, and you are you. I won't blame all of you for one person's mistakes. After saying that, Noah turned around and walked in the direction of the throne room. You all come together. Yes, Your Majesty. Everyone obediently agreed, stood up, and followed Noah in the direction of the throne room. Because Noah used the ability of Anzol's Ring of Respect to teleport directly to the room in front of the throne room, the distance between the throne room and the throne room was not very far. When Noah arrived in front of the throne room, the two combat maids went past Noah and opened the door for Noah to pass through. Noah led a group of NPCs from Nezaric's underground tomb into the throne room. A group of NPCs from Nezaric's underground catacombs stopped in front of the throne room. Noah, on the other hand, walked up the steps alone, came to the throne, and sat down directly. Noah didn't even look at the NPCs in the great underground tomb of Nazarick as he issued an order. Main control source, activate. As soon as he finished speaking, a translucent window that looked a bit like a control panel suddenly flashed in front of Noah. This scene was like a character opening a personal interface in a game. It gave people a feeling that this was not reality. Noah cast his gaze at the window that suddenly flashed in front of him. It was a window that was divided into several pages by labels. Each page was densely filled with text. This window was the management system of the underground tomb of Nazarick. Chapter 12:18. When it came to loyalty to the highest ruler of the Nazarick underground tomb, as long as one was a member of the Nazarick underground tomb, there was no one who couldn't hold their heads high and confidently tell everyone that they would never betray him. It was also because of this strong loyalty that everyone present was so angry at Satya's betrayal. Everyone, including Yair Abed and Demiurgos, felt that Satya's betrayal was trampling on this loyalty, right? For the NPCs of the Nazarick underground tomb who had the same loyalty, wasn't this unforgivable? In addition, even if she had no choice, Satya had indeed betrayed the supreme ruler of the Nazarick underground tomb. No matter what the reason was, it would not be able to convince the NPCs of the Nazarick underground tomb to understand. However, if the same thing were to happen to him, what would happen? Yair Abed and the others shuddered just thinking about it. If they were under mind control, even if they were unwilling, what could they do? In the end, they would still betray Noah, wouldn't they? The NPCs of the Nazarick underground tomb were not afraid of death. Compared to being mentally controlled and betraying Noah, these NPCs would rather die. The scary thing was that they couldn't even choose to die. That would be a fate worse than death. Do you understand now? Noah sighed. Even Satya, who shouldn't be mentally controlled, was mentally controlled. How can you guarantee that you won't encounter the same thing? Calm down. Only then did the NPCs in Nazarick's underground tomb calm down and calm down. Sorry, Lord Noah, Yair Abed said with some shame. We were reckless. That's not important. Noah shook his head. What's important is that we have to figure out why Satya was mentally controlled. Otherwise, your situation will become very dangerous. The NPCs of the Nazarick underground tomb nodded heavily. In Yggdrasil, mental control also existed. A mind-dominated character is, as the name suggests, a subject of servitude to the person using the mind domination until the mind domination is removed or the character dies. As an undying, be it positive or negative mental influence, it should not have any effect on Satya. However, there were exceptions to everything. Take Noah for example. His curse resistance could also repel all mysteries, whether beneficial or not, unless the mysteries could affect even the gods. However, through Noah's own use of mysteries, such as magic, even if it did not affect God, it could still affect him. Noah wasn't the only one. Luohao, who was also a god slayer, was able to use Eastern divination. Yerek, known as the Black Prince, could also use magic. Many of the god slayers could even borrow the power of magic props that were activated by their own curse power to obtain mysterious help. Chapter 12:19. Not far from Khan village, there was an extremely vast open space. This was the place where Noah and Yair Bedard had captured all of the scripture of sunlight from the Celian theocracy. At this moment, this extremely vast open space appeared to be in a rather sorry state. To be specific, in the center of the vast open space, there was a small area that seemed to have been burnt and had turned pitch black. And in this small charred area, stood a figure. It was a rather petite figure of a young girl with a beautiful face. She was wearing a red and black princess-like dress, and her silver-gray hair was tied into a ponytail that shone with a gorgeous luster under the sunlight. The beautiful petite girl was like a noble little princess, and the scene of her standing under the sunlight was extremely beautiful. Unfortunately, that small area that was completely charred black had completely destroyed the entire beautiful atmosphere. Moreover, if one looked closely, they would discover that the girl who looked like a noble little princess was like a puppet that was hung by an invisible string. Her hands were hanging down, and her body was hanging down without any strength. Her pair of scarlet eyes had no focus at all, and she looked quite strange. At a certain moment, in front of this open space, a burst of darkness suddenly surged out and gathered in the space, forming a semi-oval shape. It was the shape of a door. A few figures walked out of the door that was made up of pitch-black darkness and appeared on the empty ground out of thin air. They were the NPCs from the great underground tomb of Nassarik led by Noah. As soon as they appeared, Yair Bedard immediately spoke. "Be on guard." The NPCs from the great underground tomb of Nassarik who walked out of the teleportation magic called portal seemed to have been ready for a long time. Almost at the instant when Yair Bedard's voice sounded, they began to move without hesitation. Whoosh! With Annabelle as the leader, a total of 6 combat maids from the Pleiades star cluster spread out like phantoms. They scuttled to the surroundings with weapons in their hands, facing outside, and faces full of vigilance. Noah, Marley, Cositas, Demiurgos, Sebastian, and the other level 100 NPCs formed an encirclement with their backs facing Noah, protecting him inside. Finally, a black light flashed on Yair Bedard's body, and a pitch-black demon-shaped armor covered her entire delicate body. A giant axe also appeared in her hand, protecting Noah. The 3 lines of defense protected Noah layer by layer, and it could be said that they were on guard to the extreme. Obviously, the NPCs from the great underground tomb of Nassarik were worried that there was a powerful enemy who could control Satya and harm Noah. Only Noah, who was heavily protected, raised his eyes. Satya, the guardian with the strongest solo ability in the great underground tomb of Nassarik, was hanging there like a marionette. This made Noah's mood extremely bad. It was as if Satya had lost her life and turned into a pure corpse. She did not react to any changes in her surroundings, and her scarlet eyes were empty and lifeless. She did not have any consciousness at all. Her behavior was telling everyone present that Satya had been controlled by Satya. Satya had indeed been controlled by her mind. However, Noah did not understand. Since those guys from the Siren theocracy had used a world-class item to control Satya's mind, then why was Satya like this? After all, Satya was a level 100 super expert. Moreover, her professions were all focused on combat. In terms of combat power, she was stronger than many level 100 characters. In this world, an existence at Satya's level was like a natural disaster that could act on its own. Even if the 6 great gods of the Siren theocracy were players, they would at most be level 100. Even if they were stronger than Satya, they would not be much stronger. Considering Saty's combat strength, since they had her under control, it was unlikely that they would leave such a super fighter behind. In the game, characters who have been controlled by their minds will act according to the orders of the existence that controls them. Noah frowned. But Satya was directly thrown here as if she didn't receive any orders. Something must have happened before the other party gave the order, right? Bade raised his conjecture to Noah while guarding his surroundings. Looking at the surrounding situation, Satya seems to have had a conflict with the enemy before she was controlled and fought. Considering that the other party has a world-class item, the strength of the humans in this world shouldn't surpass Satya's. It's very likely that before Satya's mind was completely controlled, Satya's last desperate counterattack might have defeated the ruler. That's possible. If Satya's final counterattack had killed her opponent before the Overlord gave the order, it would make sense that Satya had stayed here alone without receiving any orders. Noah turned his gaze to the ground around where Satya was standing. The area was charred black, proving that Satya had fought with the enemy before she became like this. However, there were no corpses around. It was obvious that Satya had more than one enemy. Even after killing the ruler, the other party's companions still retrieved the corpse and evacuated. They probably had no choice but to leave Satya here, right? In Satya's situation, if he ignored her, she would continue to stay like this. However, if he got too close, or if he attacked Satya, it was very likely that Satya would attack him. Unless he removed Satya's mental control state. At that moment, Noah took out a small silver sword from his waist. Closing his eyes, Noah held the silver dagger tightly and spoke softly. Aster, can you remove the mental control from Satya's body? As the highest level elven device and one of the strongest, even the 5 elven monarchs had to be wary of its power. Aster had a curse resistance ability that was even more illegal than the God Slayer. Therefore, if it was the Demon Slayer, there might be a way to remove the control of the world-class item on Satya. Aster's voice sounded in Noah's mind. No problem. I'm Master's sword. As long as I have sufficient divine power, unless it's at the level of the gods that Master has killed, I have the ability to remove all mysteries. Aster's voice eased Noah's expression. But the next moment, Aster's tone changed. But if I want to remove the mental control of that vampire, I have to stab my elven device into her body. This time, Noah's brows furrowed. But if I get close to her, she'll attack, right? Yes. Aster's voice sounded in Noah's mind. So, Master, please be prepared to fight that vampire. Noah fell silent. Fight against Zasha. Lord Noah. Bade seemed to have seen through Noah's thoughts and suddenly said. If you want to suppress Satya, please allow us to accept this mission. That's right. Demiurgos also said. Although we know that the Supreme Sovereign is worried that we will be under mental control like Satya, if we fight Satya, the Supreme Sovereign might also be under mental control. That's something that can't happen. Lord Noah. Yul, Mare, Cossitz, Sebastian, and the others all said in unison. Please give this mission to us. Noah did not speak. He opened his eyes and looked at the marionette-like Satya in front of him. After a while, he turned around. Send people to keep an eye on the surroundings. Don't let anyone come close. If you find anyone from the Si Lien cult nation, take them down immediately. After confirming that no one is secretly watching, we'll deal with Satya's matter. Hearing this, the NPCs could only nod. You're tuning into the Journey of the Soul YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.